And here we are again, episode 3 of the Big Gay Overalls podcast. Who thought I'd make it to 3? Thanks everyone for their comments and stuff after the last 2. I appreciate the support and everyone that's following along. Super appreciate that support and for the journey that I'm on or undertaking and that sort of thing. So thank you to that. I appreciate that. That definitely makes it easier. I had an interesting conversation this week with a friend where we were talking about like they're really happy that I've put this out there to the world and continuing to do it. And they posed a question to me like how much harder was it to be open last week for episode 2 compared to episode 1? And it was a lot harder because then I don't want to feel like I'm manufacturing authenticity or faking authenticity or like trying to curate something, which it's not. But you can't, once you're aware of something and you're forced to be vulnerable and you're trying to be authentic, then you kind of fall into that trap of like, well, what do people expect me to say now, or what do people want me to say, and talking to that. And it was a really interesting conversation because I went, yeah, that's actually how I kind of felt when I was recording it. And not to say it was a bad episode, but those are the thoughts. And not to say it was fake or manufactured, but you kind of have that feeling is like, oh, I feel like I'm talking to people now rather than when I did the first episode and I was just putting it out there. I didn't know if anyone was going to listen. So it was really interesting. And then the conversation came up about, I wonder when you get to the point where you'll go, oh, flying a bit close to the flame. Won't matter if I don't do an episode this week. And because my goal is to do one a week and keep that cadence. And it just feels a bit sticky and prickly. And whammo, here we are today. Like I've procrastinated the last 2 days about recording, and I've filled a couple of pages, in a notebook of things I could talk about, topics, what can it be? But I was like, I feel like I'm treading into that manufactured space again. And it felt uncomfortable to talk. And another friend messaged me with a comment saying, love the podcast, love seeing you delve into this being more open, but I feel like you're pretty guarded still. So I look forward to seeing some of that peel back. And I was like, well spotted, well done. It's uncomfortable. Like it's, weird. And I feel like I'm having conversations with friends, but I can't see anyone sitting on the opposite side of the table. So that's a challenge to continue to feel like I'm being authentic and not curating or manufacturing, content just for the sake of content. And not that I'm looking for clickbait or anything like that. Like I'm not promoting this thing. It's just doing its thing. Like if people find it and listen to it and get value, yay. If they never find it, yay. Like if nobody listens, yay. Like I'm not looking at the stats. I'm not looking at the data. Like, oh, it's, got X amount of listens or views, or YouTube did this. Like that's not my intention. My intention is for me to have a way to verbalize and go through my story. So I was thinking about today and like the spirit of the essence of the podcast and me getting out of my own way. So I'm going to talk about something today that is very uncomfortable for me to talk about. And I will talk about it in a way that, maintains privacy for other people who are involved, because that's not for me to tell their story, but it's for me to tell my story from my experience. So I'm just going to do it. And I actually called this episode, I don't know if that'll be the working title of this episode is Laid Bare, but I don't know if that's the title that will be when it comes out. But today I want to talk about the first relationship I had with a woman where I truly was able to acknowledge that this is who I am. And not very few people know, well, probably a few more people than I would give credit for know, but it was about 14 years ago, give or take, where I felt, I don't know why, I felt a very strong connection with this person. And I don't know why. It completely hit me out of the blue. Like we We're in a common group. We were connecting on Twitter, and I don't know why, I just felt such a strong connection with this person. It was the first time I really put my finger on it that I had like butterflies in the stomach and the whole like being drawn to somebody. And I didn't turn away from it and I didn't hide from it. Now, we were both, married at the time. So we're both working in those kind of, a kind of tricky gray area. And that's not something I'm incredibly proud that I did, because that's not, doesn't align with my values, but I was kind of operating on just what this feeling was, and I had never ever ever felt it. And there were a lot of complexities to the relationship we had, notwithstanding being married, and those sort of feelings and emotions. um she struggled a lot with anxiety and those things, and I was kind of like in this whole new space of like, well, who the fuck even am I that I'm pursuing this thing? And it was not like your, first great romance or anything like that. It was very complex and challenging and difficult, and um clearly didn't end well after a period of about 14, 15 months, something like that, when a third party became involved. But it led me down a whole path where I was like, holy shit. Like, I had joked with friends before about, like, well, I'd have to be the receiver because I couldn't do any of that stuff like that. Couldn't. Turns out when you're, have an intense connection with somebody, it doesn't matter. Like that's just technicality. So I was like, oh. And, it was very much a not on my terms relationship. It was very much on their terms as to, pull you in, push you away, pull you in, push you away, which is the nature of anxiety. And I tried to be as supportive around that as I could. And I probably gave away a lot of myself in that time, because it was like, well, whatever it takes to make this person happy, even if it's at my own expense, which I had done previously with one of my first boyfriends. It was like, well, whatever you need, like whatever he needs to be happy, and then everything's all good, then I'm all good. And I had said when that relationship ended, like, I'm never going to do that again. Well, and then here I was, but didn't really realize until after. Um, but at the start, like, I did not understand, like, didn't know this person, lived in a completely different part of the country to me, had never met them like face to face. And it was the weirdest thing that had like grown and developed. And it was um an amazing revelation to me, where it kind of ripped the band-aid off and went, nope, this is who you are actually. Because when it was good and when everything was good, like I was like, and even though everything was under huge blankets of secrecy and everything, but I was like, this is like, I feel comfortable in this space for the first time. I felt comfortable in my skin for the first time ever. Um, but I was so layered with guilt and confusion and what does this mean? What does this look like? Um, who am I really? And led to a lot of really deep questioning about who am I? And, it was a really confusing time because there was lots of new, lots of challenges and lots of hard. And, I guess, there's also lots of good. I'm not going to dismiss it, but, it was kind of the, I guess, the catalyst that got me to where I'm now. So, I like to look at experience in life as well. Did I learn something from it? What was a lesson? It wasn't really a waste of time. It was very difficult, very challenging, very confusing time. But I did learn a lot about me as a person, and also learnt the value of, true friendship and understanding, the the support crew that I had around me at the time and the people who were in my tight circle. Like, there was literally 3 people. When I talk about a tight circle, I'm talking about 3 people who, I had confided in and trusted, and they never judged me. They never said to me, "Well, you're a shitbag human, you're any of those things," which I had said that I was. And I didn't feel good about lots of aspects of it, and it wasn't who I thought I was, but I didn't know what else to do, if I'm honest. And, people may hear that and think, "Well, that's just a cop out, you know what's right and wrong," but unless you've walked in that path, it's really hard to explain that I just didn't know what else to do, because I was acting purely on, "Holy shit, I'm drawn here," and I'd never, ever, ever felt something that strong in my life. Now, it's not saying that person was the one and the thing and whatever. It was just, it was being the catalyst for understanding that feeling and putting some other pieces together. Um, and like I said in earlier episodes, throughout my entire life, I'd felt certain draws or attachments, and they were, sometimes it was meeting the need of me being seen and heard and valued, which I didn't get, as a child, and I didn't get that. Um, and so some of it was filling that, and I understand now, like, why I would seek that out. But still, some of it felt like a draw, and I'm not going to say it was a romantic draw or a um, attraction draw, but I felt a draw, but I couldn't say what it was. And even looking back now, I still wouldn't call it attraction, but I just wanted to be in the same space as those people. But there was nothing like this. Like, this was a whole new level of, like, it was like a moth to a flame. I could not look away. I could not. And, myself and the person that I was involved we had a lot of conversations about the rights and wrongs and the what ifs and I don't understand why I'm feeling this way, because it's not something that had really consciously crossed either our pathways. Um, I don't know whether, because she was quite, I know that I was trying to save her from herself. That was part of my thing, is like, I can save her, I can fix her. And that's what I know that's now, a tendency is that's what I do. Like, I tried that with members at the gym. It's like, I can save them from themselves, I can help them. And, that's one of my, well, when not used correctly or when not done with some boundaries, that's like, excuse me, one of my flaws, because that leads to me giving away me to that other person. And ultimately, I can't save anybody else. I can't want them to be better, because the interesting aspect for me is, like, when we're not involved in any form of relationship or friendship anymore, myself and this person, um, all of those things that she'd told me that she couldn't fix or couldn't change, bang, changed with the next person that she'd moved, like, immediately onto. Um, and suddenly those things were not an issue anymore. And suddenly the anxiety was not as big anymore. And there's all these things that weren't an issue. And I was like, what the fuck? To be blunt, is like, well, I'd sat in that space with you and tried to come up with every solution, to make life easier, to smooth the path, to go, well, what are the options? How do we work with this? And in a sense, make life easier. And none of that made a lick of difference. But then with the right person, I guess, or the person that she felt like she could let that stuff go with, she did. And I spent a long time questioning about, well, why the fuck wasn't that me? I went above and beyond. I did all the things. But that's when I had some of those realizations about, um, it wasn't, I couldn't save them, and I can't save anyone. The only person I can save is me. Um, People who want to change and people who want to be saved from whatever situation they're in, then only they can do it. Like, we can help them and we can support them, but we can't want it or do it for them. And I know that like people in families who've got people who struggle with addiction or things like that, they understand that concept. Like you can want them to be clean and sober as much as you want, but then you can't do it for them. You can support, you can provide resources. So that was a really like gut check time for me to go, here's something that, you would see as a strength, that you want to help people, you want to care for people, but at the end of the day, it can come to nothing. Like you've invested all this time and resources and care, and someone can just walk away from that. That was really fucking hard. Like it was hard. And I didn't understand that the problem, it wasn't me. I thought I was the problem. I was not good enough, would never be good enough. This is not the life for me. And this is not what I would have. I mean, ultimately, it was a blessing the way that things played out, because, that would not have been healthy for anyone to continue in that space, like for her or for me. So that was really, really hard. And it took me many years of sort of rewinding and backtracking and going over things like, well, what the fuck could I have done differently? Like, and that's the thing, like, there's nothing. Like, I could never have been enough, and that's okay. I don't see that as a reflection that I'm not enough as a person and not worthwhile, but in that situation for that person, I was never enough. And now that I'm in a very healthy, stable, supportive, equal relationship, I understand that, I am enough and what I bring to the table is enough, but I also don't have to save my wife. I don't have to go, I don't have to, and I still fight against this subconsciously as I demonstrating my worth and demonstrating my value and, oh, I'm contributing, I'm doing, equal and that sort of stuff. Because that's not our dynamic. And I'm enough as I am, and I don't need to save her because she's more than capable of saving herself. I can provide support when she needs it and love and care and give her space to be herself, just like she gives me. And that's why we work so well. And I understand that now. But for a long time, it was like, well, there's something wrong with me that I wasn't good enough in that situation, despite my best efforts. And those that know that I went above and beyond. Don't mind the dog barking in the background. She's currently running up the side of the house. Those that know that, I went above and beyond, and like, I don't want to paint myself to be the good guy because I'm not fucking perfect. And clearly that was a time in my life where I'm not proud of who I was and what I did at the time, particularly to, understanding I was married and he was doing nothing wrong. He was working hard. I was working hard, but, having this, relationship was not who I thought I was. So, I think for all intents and purposes, he may have clued in that something was happening there. I remember a message like once everything fall apart, and I was like, fuck this shit, like everything's hard. He'd sent me a message saying, I hope one day that you'll be able to tell me what happened. So I think he had a bit of an inkling, but it was really difficult. Like when it ended, I felt very isolated, very alone, going, well, this is what I thought my future was going to be, but now it's not. And fuck, where do I fit? And how do I go back to the other life? And how do I go back to reconciling, putting all this stuff in a box and going, this is where it stays now, because this is not appropriate. This doesn't work. This doesn't fit. And go back to doing what is expected of Lisa. So you work hard, you do the things that you need to do, and you keep your head down and just tick the boxes. Really difficult, like really difficult. And for a long time I had a chip on my shoulder that I had to prove that I was worthwhile and successful and validate myself in the CrossFit space because we had some overlap there. So it's challenging and really learnt some big lessons. And 14 years down the track now, I can kind of look back at that time with some gratitude, because it really did open my eyes to a whole new potential, even though it took me quite a long time then, like literally another 10 years to actually, seek the therapy, do the things, and make the decisions that were the best for everybody. Um, it opened up that pathway for me and went, well, maybe this is who you are. And even though I shut it away for a time after that and could never really, like, I never felt that I gave 100% of myself to anybody for the next 10 years. Not to my husband, not to close friends, because no one ever knew 100% of my life. And, this is the first time that I've spoken in a public sense about that, because again, I still want to, I have this need to protect, and maybe it's to protect myself if I'm, cut through the bullshit, is that I don't want to be the bad guy anywhere. And even though I know that, like, well, I was the bad guy. And I know that that's not necessarily an accurate representation, but in my brain, about my values at that time was, that's how I saw it. And I'm still not, clearly, very uncomfortable to even have the conversation now. Like, it's going to be as hard as fuck for me to hit publish on this episode, because whilst I know the chances of those particular people who are involved hearing this, there's still that fucking chance. I'm like, well, if it all blows up, it all blows up. Like, the idea of this podcast is to replace the idea of writing a book about what my journey is, so that, I'm not going to sit here as some, perfectly shining fucking halo of, yeah, well, I came out and then I just had this amazing first up relationship and life was fucking wonderful and I landed on my feet. Like, that's not authentic, and that's not what happened. I had to do learning and growing along the way, but I had to do it all under fucking a big blanket of darkness, because no one knew what I was trying to figure out and dealing with, because no one knew what had happened, where I'd been, any of that stuff. And, whilst when talking to, my coach the other day, a couple of weeks ago, and I spoke about this in the last podcast, is about, you got the goose that lays a golden egg, you landed on your feet. People, leave a relationship, they have to date, they have to figure themselves out. You didn't have to do that. Well, I did, but I did it without anybody knowing what I was trying to figure out. And I was trying to figure it out on my own in the dark, while still, being a duck on a pond. Like, oh, it's cruising on that pond, life is great, I've got my shit together, I'm a successful business owner, I'm doing all these things. But underneath, I felt like a complete shitbag. My feet were all tangled up in weeds and all this stuff. And I was trying to figure out who am I? Which is why, I created such a identity around being an affiliate owner, being a CrossFit coach, belonging in the community. This is who I am. This is who I am. If don't look too closely at anything else, but this is who I am. This is what I'm portraying, and this is who I am. And, it's isolating, and I self-isolated basically. Before it became a cool thing in 2020, I self-isolated and just did not feel the need to peel that stuff off publicly, because I was like, well, what the fuck happens? I might be out in the street, like, everyone's going to hate me, I'm the worst person in the world, and all of this stuff that I carried that was so fucking heavy. So when I did start that journey of counseling and understanding that shit wasn't mine to carry, because, like, I was worrying about things that I had no control of. I can't control other people's reactions. I can't control what people do or say. All I can do is do me, and then, like, deal with that, and they're going to be them, and then figure out some middle ground. Like, that's the fucking tricky space. But, and I can unpack that and go, well, that's not yours to carry. Like, you can't protect everyone else from their feelings. So it's back to that saving people thing. Like, I can't save people from themselves. Like, I can't want things for people more than they want it themselves. I can't be the solution, because that's, like, fucking impossible. And that's a check to your ego, but also who you think you are, and figuring out that you can't be that. And I could never foresee a situation that would lead me to leave my home situation because there's too much uncertainty. Everyone will hate me. I just can't do that. So on the flip side, when I met Sharon, who's now my wife, gratefully so, that was the second time that I felt that incredible pull. But this time it was more balanced. So there wasn't that push, pull, give, take, like pull you in, push you away. It was just like, I'm here to support you however you need it. And you can tell your story to me. And, we were good friends for a significant period. And because like I was all of a sudden telling her things that I'd never told another human being, and I don't know why. Like maybe it's her therapizing skills and her ability to ask a question the right way, that I just felt like I'd been sliced open, and I didn't feel uncomfortable because it was a safe environment to do that. And then that's when I was like, I have no choice, but I have to be with this person. Like this is my missing piece. And I had never truly felt that. Like whilst I had a draw, 14 years prior, that was not about a missing piece. It was just this energy, this feelings that I'd never, ever, ever, ever felt. This was like a magnet being drawn to a piece of metal. Like this is where I fit. This is where I belong. And that was a whole different dynamic. And being able to have the space to like not be forced to make decisions, but I just did it myself because I was like, this is what feels that I need to do to live my best life right now. And I need to look after me right now. Whereas I'd never given myself permission to do that. But when you've got support, around you and the space to do that, then those decisions get a fuck ton easier. Like it just gets immeasurably easier. But again, it didn't come without challenges and hiccups and feelings of worth or belonging, or do I deserve this, or she's going to look behind the curtain and go, well, you really are a shitbag human and it's all going to go away. And, I spoke on earlier episodes about how, I have to work around that and understand that it's not necessarily like she accepts me 100% for who I am in any given moment with no expectation. And it's not going to go away. That's just, excuse me, who we are. It's what we do. So that's been a learning and a challenging and something that, I'm getting better at accepting 100%. And I'm so grateful for this period of my life being so much better. So I guess there's no real point, there's no great revelation, I guess, in today's episode, except me being and embracing that authenticity and talking about things that are hard, and doing, things that are challenging and uncomfortable, because that's what being authentic is about. And that's the idea of this process for me, more so than anybody else, that, it's about me being authentic and me being me and me understanding like what drives me. So if you've got to the end of it, thank you for listening. Drop me a comment or anything. You can find me on Big Gay Overalls podcast. The link is in the little thing there if I've pointed in the right direction, if the screen's the right way around. Feel free to connect on Instagram. I'm always happy to chat. Next week, I'm going to have my first guest, actually, and that is going to be my lovely wife. And we're going to talk through probably a heap more things that make me feel just as uncomfortable again. But I think it's a good conversation to have because she's been such a foundation piece in me getting to this point in this journey, and also understanding, the challenges. She herself is what we would describe as, late in life, coming out, and, her story through that as well, and how, our stories now work together and how it works because, that's us being authentically us. So that's going to be next week. I'm going to drag her on. So I guess until then, I'll see you on the next one. Have a good week.